Started. Okay, okay, let's start. Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving into a topic that hits home for so many of us. It's jealousy and insecurity in relationships. These emotions, as uncomfortable as they can be, often have deep roots in our personal stories and experiences. But what if jealousy isn't the real problem? What if it's actually a solution that we're just trying to solve it in a wrong way? Correct, right? So joining me today is the incredible Shannon Bryant. So welcome to the show, Shannon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely, lovely. So, Shannon, like before we start our conversation, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all of our listeners. Dear listeners, Shannon is a pattern transformation expert and founder of Top Self. So, Shannon is on a mission to help women demolish the patterns that hold them back and dominate their future. So, whether it's in love, life, or leadership. She's also the host of globally ranked Top Self podcast, where she unravels the science behind jealousy, insecurity, and overthinking. So, through her expertise in integrated attachment theory and her corporate leadership experience, she helps us bridge the gap between emotional patterns and real world transformations. And I'm very excited to have her here today to discuss how we can break free from jealousy and insecurity and step into a personal power. So, welcome to the show, Shannon.
Thank you so much for having me. And you're exactly right. It's
Hmm.
jealousy is just the symptom. It's just the thing showing up to say, hey, you might need to go look at what's really at the root of these insecure habits that you're doing.
Hmm. Correct. So, I mean, yes, exactly. As you often say, like jealousy isn't a real problem; it's actually a solution. So that's such a unique perspective. I mean, if you can break down for us, like how is jealousy a solution, and
Mhm.
what are we often getting wrong about it?
Yeah. So, of course, people say, I have a problem with jealousy if they're experiencing this extreme jealousy and insecurity that I work with. It seems as if jealousy is the main issue. This is the problem. This is causing issues in the relationship. It's causing them to feel anxious every day, having knots in their stomach, constantly worried. So we will blame it on jealousy, of course. But really, what's at the root of it is some core wounds and core beliefs that we probably have that we need to dig into. And so, most people, when we're trying to accomplish something, we set a goal or we're trying to get over a habit of ours, especially in this case, the insecure habits. Maybe you're looking through your partner's phone or their text messages, you're looking them up on location services because you have this constant fear that they are going to cheat or leave. And those are just some really insecure habits that we might get into when we have this extreme or morbid jealousy, as it's called. So, at the root of that, though, is something much, much deeper. A lot of times, someone who experiences this may come from a dysfunctional background. So, their childhood and the way they were raised. In my case, I grew up with an alcoholic father who, the environment was violent and chaotic. And so sometimes love felt really good, and sometimes love felt really scary. And so as I grew up and started dating in my adult life, of course, then I'm faced with these challenges, and insecurity and jealousy is one of them because I want love, but I'm afraid of it. And so, um, we have to get to the root of that. We generally, as children, if we aren't able to process a situation, we we have to have certainty. And so we will create stories. And then we look at those stories as if they're truth. And we go through life believing this story or stories that we've told about ourselves. So in my case, my dad left at the age of 12. I didn't really have a relationship with him. So I told myself, well, gosh, if my own father doesn't love me, why would anyone else? I must not be worthy of love. And so that was the story I continued to tell myself. And so when we have these stories that we tell ourselves, that's when the real struggle comes in. So we have to get to the root of it and change those stories that are stored in our programming, in our subconscious, versus trying to tackle it through the conscious mind of saying, I don't want to, I'm just not going to do this anymore. The next time I'm not going to be jealous, or I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. If you've got that negative subconscious programming, you're going to go right back to it every time.
That's very well said. Definitely, definitely. And like, if jealousy is a solution, then what are some of the healthier ways to approach it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the ways that those
Uh,
programmings, and so we'll talk about some of the
uh,
most common core wounds or core beliefs that we may start to tell ourselves. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm
yeah.
unloved. I don't belong. I'll be betrayed. I'll be abandoned. Those are a lot of common ones that we
uh,
may start to develop that story as a child and then continue with that, or we may have an event that happened. And so the way that this programming gets really cemented in us is through repetition plus emotion. So
yeah.
those are sort of the two components that we have to have, or that we generally have when these stories are created.
Mhm.
Emotion is a big one. So you don't have to necessarily always have the repetition, because someone could not be worried about driving their car, and then all of a sudden they're in a really bad car accident. And now, because that's a big emotion, that's a big thing that happened to them, now they're very nervous about driving their car. But typically it happens with repetition plus emotion. And so it's developed through what we witness, what we hear, and what we experience. And so repetition plus emotion, it's the same way then we can reprogram those core wounds that we have.
Perfect. That's really awesome. And on this, like, so I have to say one thing. Like, if jealousy is a solution, then um, the healthier ways. So, dear listeners, I guess you have heard her, like, how the process should be, what would be the approach. So, on this, one of your core beliefs is that overthinking and anxiety
Mm.
are
Mm.
programmed and not permanent. I really like this thing, but um, if you could explain, like, how these patterns get programmed uh, into us and how we can start to rewrite that code.
Hmm. Yeah. So the patterns come in our program through repetition plus emotion. And so this could be, and again, I'll use myself as an example. But if I am constantly experiencing that love is sometimes good and love is sometimes scary from my environment, then I'm going to grow up and I'm going to think, okay, love is sometimes good and sometimes scary. So I should possibly be afraid of someone, or people are always going to leave me because that's what happened. And I continue to tell that story. I was abandoned by my father. The next person, if I'm in a relationship and they leave or potentially cheat on me, okay, that confirms, right? And so we continue this. So repetition plus emotion. Um, then we start to build these really unhealthy strategies to to get or hope for that need to be met. So if I am constantly afraid that someone is going to abandon me, I'm going to try to get certainty that they won't, through questioning my partner, through maybe looking through their phone to see if there's any evidence of infidelity, looking them up on location to see if they really are where they say they are. And so every time I do that, it cements this, again, this unhealthy strategy that I'm using to get my need met of security, of safety. And so it's kind of this false promise that, okay, I am safe, I am secure, this person's not going to abandon me. The only person that can abandon you is yourself. And so we don't ever know if somebody's going to leave, if we're going to, if they will have an affair, if we're always going to be together. So we really have to start learning these healthy strategies and ways to get our own needs met so that we don't have that constant cycle. When you're jealous and you're needing that reassurance, it's almost like this addiction that we get because we have that, uneasiness, and we don't like that uneasy feeling. We get anxious, we get nervous, and so we don't like that that uneasy feeling. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. So it's like, how do I get this out of me? How do I get this out of my body? This feeling, this anxiety. How do I get back to comfortable? And a lot of the times we will choose things like questioning our partner, getting that reassurance. Once we get that reassurance, we feel better for just a few. And then, okay, now here comes the anxiety and the overthinking again. So we have to go to the root of this problem. And we talk about it as if it's like a GPS, right? So if you have programmed and your core belief is, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love, I'm always going to be abandoned or betrayed, then it doesn't typically work to talk ourselves into just being secure or not overthinking or, trusting in our partner, because all of our actions come from our core beliefs. So you have to change the belief to change the behavior. So we have to reprogram the same way it got programmed in there through repetition plus emotion of the opposite of that. So if my belief is I'm not good enough, then I have to choose the opposite. I am good enough. What are the pieces of evidence where I am good enough? And continue that repetition plus emotion. So coming up with, I can feel where in this instance I was good enough. And so really anchoring into a situation where you were good enough and where you felt good enough. And you just continue that for a certain number of days. And that's part of how we reprogram. So we tend to get in a lot of unhealthy patterns.
Hmm. Exactly. So, like many of our listeners are professionals balancing the relationships with the careers. So, you have mentioned that these patterns don't just affect love, they show up in the leadership and the teamwork as well. So, if you can explain like how this happens.
Yeah. So, if I am someone who, I am not trustworthy, like if I think, oh, I don't belong or I don't fit in, I may not speak up in meetings and give my opinion. And therefore, some people may never see my talent. If I'm not willing to, or I don't feel like I belong, that's one way. Certainly, as leaders, if we aren't trustworthy, like we don't show trust, we have a hard time trusting people. It's going to be really hard to trust your teams to get things done. You're probably going to end up micromanaging because you don't have that trust in people that they will do the right thing. Because if my belief is that people will betray me, if I have that core belief, then I'm probably not going to be very trustworthy with my teams to take an initiative and me not having to interject and intervene. So it can play out a lot of different ways in your career as well.
Perfect, perfect, lovely. And also, like uh how can someone start identifying their own attachment style? I mean, are there
Mhm.
specific clues they can look into their relationships?
Yeah, I have an attachment style quiz that on my website at topself.com. They can certainly go there, take the attachment style quiz, and just see where they fall in. It'll give them some good information on their particular attachment style and how that relates and shows up in relationships. It'll
Hmm.
also give a little bit of insight into, the relationship expectation. So, for example, if someone comes back as anxious, preoccupied. Typically, those people have a hard time setting boundaries because they want that love and a connection so much. These are people pleasers. They'll do really anything to get that love and connection. And so, oftentimes, they will not set boundaries for themselves. And that, of course, can cause some issues. And if they're with someone who is secure and does set boundaries, those boundaries might seem offensive to that anxious person. So, one example might be if you're in a dating situation or even at work, but where I've set this boundary, maybe we've spent several days together and I'm like, hey, look, I've got some other things that I've got to take care of personally. The anxious person might think, oh my gosh, see, they're leaving. I still want to spend time with them. They don't want to spend time with me. And they take that as, oh, they must not like me as much as I like them. But really, it's just one of them has a healthy boundary in relationships and the other one doesn't. And same thing at work. You might not set up boundaries at work and you continue to take on tasks and do things for other people and be a people pleaser to the detriment of yourself, where you're burned out, you're run down, you're feeling tired because you want them to like you want to fit in, you want to belong. So you're doing all these things without boundaries. So it can really show up depending on your attachment style, can show up in so many different ways in your romantic relationships and in the workplace.
Perfect. That's really awesome. And with this, why do you think that this misconception is so widespread? You have helped thousands of women transform their relationships with themselves and with others. So, uh, what's the common misconception people have about jealousy and insecurity that
Mm,
you think we need to challenge right way?
yeah. So I hear this often where, someone who is jealous, they often don't have anyone to go to because they'll get the typical, oh my gosh, you're being crazy. That's why are you so worried about something that potentially hasn't even, that hasn't happened yet. And so when you get advice like that, there's something wrong with you, you're not the same as other people, the way that you think is crazy. That then leads to people shutting down and not being able to talk about it and not having resources and places where they can feel safe to say, well, here's why. And so I think the biggest misconception is people taking this insecurity or jealousy as like something that's just easily like, just stop worrying about it or stop being that way. Um, and it's not that easy. Someone who's experiencing this has probably had some major dysfunction in their life, and they have these program patterns that aren't just easy enough to flip the switch. And so, you know, the people that are experiencing it, and so thank you so much for giving this platform because even them going to friends and family, sometimes even therapists that say, well, you just have to get over that. You have to just, stop worrying about it. And it's not that easy to do.
I'm unable to hear if you're speaking, so
Yeah, yeah.
there we
Can you hear me
go.
now? Yeah, yeah.
I can, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying like it's really, really great connecting with you, and uh thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today. And because I really loved what you have mentioned about uh I I mean I really love like that you reframed jealousy and insecurity
Mm,
not as a problems to suppress, but opportunities to grow and transform. So
absolutely.
that's really great. And for all the listeners, I have to mention, if you are ready to demolish old patterns and step into your personal power, then make sure to check out Shannon's podcast, Top Shelf, and also find more about her incredible work at her website. I'll put the website link into the show notes for your easy reference. And um, as I was mentioning, like jealousy and insecurity aren't here to define you, but they are here to teach you. So, uh, take what you have learned today and start seeing your patterns in a new light. And as always, keep working towards healthy mind and healthy life. And do not forget to subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs it, and leave a review definitely. So until next time, this is your host Avik signing off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.